What is far more rare than people realize? Bit of peace and effing quiet. A to the mother effing men. Shh. A to the mother effing men. This is why I go fishing and hiking. Just to get away from noise and to not have to think about work, bills, basically anything that isn't fishing or hiking. When I was a kid, my dad would take me fishing, and if I started making noise he would tell me to be quiet because I was going to scare the fish. As I've gotten older I realized he just wanted some peace and quiet. I tell my nephew that he's scaring the fish now for the same reason. Solid brown fur cats. Apparently it's some kind of recessive gene in them. Also, brown eyes. They're common in big cats but quite rare for domestic cats. Fascinating thread. I think it's common for cats to like thread actually. Huh, yeah, I've never actually seen a brown cat. I never thought about it until now. I owned a brown domestic cat who had a feral mother. So she was not some pedigreed Havana brown. She had the most beautiful green eyes. My vet had 3,000 cats in his practice and she was the only brown one. Everybody remembered Ellie. People who remain friends with you once you leave school. You also find out who your real friends are when you leave a job. I don't think it's necessarily intentional when you don't hang with people you used to work with. Most adults are busy with day-to-day life. It simply takes too much bandwidth to keep up friendships as well. So we tend to have friends who slide easily into our routine. Once you don't work together and see each other all week, it's just too hard to maintain. It's not a personal knock on either person. Agreed. I've come to accept that most friendships in life are seasonal. They happen because you work together, live near each other, kids go to the same daycare, etc. Once that thing that brings you together goes away, the friendship generally does, too. I would expand this to actual friends opposed to just convenient people to socialize with. Less than 1% of the people you call friends are actual friends. Almost everyone is friends of convenience. The minute being friends with you is more costly than beneficial, takes more time than emotional satisfaction returned, you are dropped. Don't worry, you do this to people too. Green eyes make up just 2% of the global population. But like 40% of fictional characters lol. Large green eyes that seem to glow behind jet black hair. His eyes were as green as a fresh pickled toad. This makes me feel very special. You are 1 in 162 million. Northern Lights. The amount of people I've heard say, "We've come all this way. What time do they come on?" is staggering. As an Icelander, I've probably heard this question more times than I've actually seen the Northern Lights. I visited Iceland last November and saw them all 3 nights I was there. Thought they were pretty common there, weather permitting. I saw the Northern Lights in the airplane flying to Iceland. It was incredibly lucky. Born and raised in Newfoundland, Canada, seen the Northern Lights once in my life. I know we are not that far up, just above and to the right of New York. But that one time I was in Gros Mornay Park and it was a magical night. Foxes came out of the woods to circle us. Realistically they were hunting, but us big humans didn't give a single F lol. We roasted hot dogs and bologna on the open fire. Greeny yellow blues, light red streaks in the sky. It was nice. That's really rare to see. The red, I mean, not the fried bologna. That's everywhere there. Stranger RE. Unfortunately, sexual assault is all too common, but the vast majority of it happens in a social context. Date RE. The kind where some maniac is hiding in an alley or a bush and jumps out to grab a total stranger is actually far less common. People say carry your keys sticking through your fingers or the police should increase foot patrols, but those are a distraction from the much larger problem, which will not be solved that way. I think it's because people want to try to blame the unacceptably high incidence of sexual assault on evil weirdos, rather than admitting it's a societal problem with the society that we are a part of. What is most disturbing is the number of RS committed by family members. People want to believe it is a stranger because facing the fact it is someone you love makes it hard to trust anyone. My grandmother and 2 of her sisters all had a child out of wedlock in the 1940s. The story was always the guy married someone else when he came back from the war. My uncle never met his father. But in the end, she was saying things that didn't make sense. Near her death, she couldn't keep the story up as her memory was slipping. From what I pieced together, they were all 3 RE'd by their uncle who had been sent to live with them. Their dad's younger brother. After all 3 were pregnant, their dad threw him out and never spoke to him again. I was able to piece out the story as the uncle's son had bits and pieces too. Heartbreaking and sad. RE'd by someone they should have been able to trust. Too common. Stranger RS are rare. My grandmother was on DS, so her 3 daughters lived with her mother. All 3 of them were RE'd by different older male family members who had also RE'd other female family members. My great-grandmother swept it all under the rug, because those were her sons, and those vile men were still allowed to be around the poor girls up until adulthood. The pissed being family members definitely makes it easier for them to get away with it. It pisses me off just thinking about it. We have a pissed in our family too. My great aunt's husband assaulted several of my cousins. They reported him. He served time. Aunt stayed with him after he got out and even brought him around to family functions his victims were attending. Last time it turned into a whole scene at the old spaghetti factory where one cousin was screaming that he shouldn't be there. The younger generation sided with her. The old folks kept saying, "She needs to get over it. He served his time." I'm like, yeah, he served his time and she's serving hers for the rest of her life. Effing insanity. When I was in university in the 90s, I remember seeing the stats on RE and really questioning the advice that was given to women. If you're drunk at a party, ask a male friend to walk you home. This literally was the advice given. If you're drunk at a party, ask a complete stranger to walk you home. Serial KS. I had a coworker who interacted with two of them. He grew up in Anchorage and used to buy donuts from Robert Hanson's bakery fairly routinely, said to this day that man made the best apple fritters he'd ever eaten, and he drove city bus and swore he ran into Israel Keys a couple times downtown. My dad is convinced he bumped shoulders with Israel Keys outside a bar one time. Said that was singularly the scariest person he'd ever seen. Nothing to in his eyes. Nothing going on in his face. Bob Hanson was an amazing baker, apparently, as far as Keys goes. He was an absolute maniac. Controlled. Which is more terrifying than a loose cannon. If you haven't already, check out the True Crime Bullsh podcast. It's a podcast about Israel Keys, his victims, and the possible victims that he may have had. Whenever I watched Criminal Minds, it seems to suggest that there is a new serial K every week. Are you saying that television lies to us? Gasp. Or Dexter. Miami is awash in them. Clean water. My son and I have been discussing this lately. He is a chemical engineer and works exclusively with water. Many of the studies he has been published on also have to do with clean water and forever chemicals. Water is a huge issue that is becoming bigger every day and normal people are forgetting about it. Flint, Michigan is in year 9. Fellow Keem here. This is absolutely true. I went to college in the American West where water was a precious commodity. I now work in surface water quality compliance on the East Coast of America, and it baffles me how flippant we are in the East with water quality. I'm in Southern California. Water is still a precious commodity out here, especially in the true desert areas of the American Southwest. Grew up in SoCal, live in Iowa now. Nobody gives any thought to water usage. A stable, loving, peaceful domestic life. To add to this, being raised in one as well. I have only recently started to realize how lucky I was to be raised mostly with my mom's family. They all genuinely love each other and get along. There's little arguments here and there, but nothing even so bad as typically sitcom stuff. Having a huge support structure just makes any challenges in life a little bit easier to weather. If I could share anything with the world, it would be how much it helps to just genuinely care for others and have them care for you. My friend was raised in a loving, stable family and it blows my mind. She just assumes she's loved and was brought to the library or congratulated for good grades. Like what? Breaks my heart as a dad that stuff doesn't even register as loving gestures to me. Just, like, the basic interactions. Humility and an understanding that we're sometimes the victim and sometimes the perpetrator. No one is ever just one or the other. We will always be the villain in someone else's story. I like to think I'm the vampire kind. I misread that as humidity and was very confused for a second. Tetanus, we get vaccines for it, but it's actually a bit harder to get than you may believe. That's good, but the disease itself is so horrible you don't want to give it any chance. It's sort of like rabies. It's pretty darn rare, but it's so awful you don't want to take any chance. Tetanus has tolerable remission rate in treatment, not great though. They pump you up with 34 kind of muscle relaxants. Rabies just KS you once you have developed any symptom. So I shouldn't worry if I step on a rusty nail? Not really, since the bacteria causing it are mostly found in soil and manure. Rust has nothing to do with it, but a rusty jagged nail full of ground soil can transfer more contamination than a smooth one. Blimps. I live in Northeast Ohio near the Goodyear hangar. We see them all the time. I had to pull up a list. That Northeast Ohio has 3 out of 4 operating Goodyear blimps named Wingfoot 1, 2 and 3, only maybe 12 are operating anywhere in the world, with a total of 25 existing at all. But we see them all the time at Wingfoot Lake Disc Golf Course. Edit, helium-filled semi-rigid airships. Okay, so I've got a rookie question. Let's say there's a need for one in Arizona for an event. Does a crew fly it there from Ohio? Or do they deflate it, load it into a truck, and re-inflate it near the event? Found this from 2008:0, And here you go. On the Goodyear blimp website, mysteriously buried halfway down the crew page. Each modern blimp is staffed with an air and ground crew consisting of 4 pilots, a public relations manager, and at least 16 ground crew, including aircraft mechanics, electronic technicians and riggers. With 3 specially equipped ground support vehicles, the crew is almost self-sustaining in the field in regard to operation and maintenance. Moving from city to city, the caravan travels by highway as the blimp flies to its next engagement. Adventure is out there. See 'em all the time driving down the 405. What instantly ages someone? Grief. Nothing ages you like grief. My mom died less than 2 months ago. One symptoms I was not expecting was the physical aches and pains associated with grief. Oh, and the fatigue can be brutal. I'm only 35, but I feel much older physically. Mentally been there for some time throughout her 16-year illness, being a caregiver for part of that time. Edit. Thank you all for your kindness. I'm so sorry to everyone that's had to endure grief. It's a pain that I could never have known before this. I was also a caretaker for both my parents. I'm also 35 and feel more like 95. My whole immediate family is now deceased. Wow, this blew up. I love all your stories, and I'm so sorry to whoever has buried one or both of their parents, grandparents, or guardians, or to anyone who has had a long road caretaking. Remember, you are important too, and to take care of yourself best you can. If you ever want to chat with someone that can empathize, feel free to reach out. I'm so sorry. Yep, when my oldest brother died, my dad went from jet black hair to gray pretty quickly. 19 years ago my husband's son was born. Exactly a month later his wife passed from skin cancer. She had this from everyone. From climbing the corporate ladder to grieving unemployed single dad living back with his parents in the span of a month. His hair also went from black to white in less than a year. Stress. When I was younger and first entered the real world, I remember working with a white-haired woman that had an always tired look about her. She had a picture of her daughter on her desk. Young, blonde, that looked so incredibly much like her I mentioned it once. Turned out that wasn't her daughter, but was her prior to her going through the FBI academy. Why would someone have a photo of themselves on their desk? To remember when they were happy and carefree? What I don't get is when PPL say you need to reduce your stress. Oh really? Like how? Have you tried just not being poor over work-ed stressed? Lack of sleep. That's why it's called beauty sleep. Must be why I'm so ugly. Yep, good sleepers look so young and chipper. Nah, I get 8 hours every night and still look like a dying Victorian child. Back pain. You can't move like a young person if your back hurts. I had a breast reduction almost 5 years ago and I feel younger now, at 30, than I did at 18. A hearty FCKU to every doctor that ever told me to just try yoga or Pilates. Ada, I am not a doctor or PT, despite my, relatively and unfortunately common, experience. The best person to give you advice is a physician or PT. Please talk to someone with a medical license and board certification if you're in pain. After almost a decade of PT, I spoke to my PCP, an orthopedic specialist, and then a plastic surgeon, but my experience is not, and should not be taken as, a universal guideline. If you need a place to start, please check out reduction. I have a cousin who has huge breasts and she's always having back issues. She's over 50 now, can't remember her exact age, but I never thought about reduction helping out with your back. Would you recommend it to someone over 50 who has had issues for over 35 years? Or is the damage done? I would recommend it to anyone, regardless of their age. If a doctor says there's no undue risk, the relief I felt was literally instantaneous. My mom and grandma were with me and they both said it was like an entirely different person stood up in the recovery room. 5 years after, I can just get out of bed without rolling to the edge and falling out. I can run, lift things, sit on the train for hours, all without suffering for it. Ada, there's still some long-term damage after 10 years of carrying around an extra 7 pounds on my chest, but I would say the pain and discomfort has improved by at least 80%. Ada Part 2, I am not a doctor or PT, despite my, relatively and unfortunately common, experience. The best person to give you advice is a physician or PT. Please talk to someone with a medical license and board certification if you're in pain. After almost a decade of PT, I spoke to my PCP, an orthopedic specialist, and then a plastic surgeon, but my experience is not, and should not be taken as, a universal guideline. If you need a place to start, please check out reduction. You're as old as your back. Or your knees. Sucks so bad. I was gonna say the way you dress, but it went real dark in the comments. I was about to type wrong hair color. This, though, I tried a lighter blonde color and felt like it aged me 15 years. Reds make me look timeless. I constantly get treated like I don't know anything because I have a young face. I dyed my hair gray and suddenly people treat me like an adult. It's wonderful. Right? I scrolled past a comment that literally just says death of a child in war. Holy F. I was gonna say puffy eyes. I was expecting some useful insights and saw only sad facts. But for some reason I giggled uncontrollably at puffy eyes. So thanks for being the giggle provider. Night shifts in the emergency department. Edit. Wow. This comment really blew up. It got more upvotes than a picture of my cat. There's too many replies to answer individually. But I'll try explaining a few things here. A lot of folks said how they enjoy working in ER and how it's almost rejuvenating for them. Don't get me wrong. ER can be thrilling. It can give you energy. That can really be true when you have a good team behind you, good working conditions and a functional hospital and healthcare system. Having said that, things that were stressful for me were mostly when you feel powerless in tough situations. When we would keep getting more and more patients and simply didn't have enough beds in the hospital. So the specialist had to call all of the departments and asking for personal favors to admit a seriously ill patient. Stuff like that happened all the time, and those were the things that drain you. Personally, I was working regular ER during my internship. Now I am a specialist of child and adolescent psychiatry. During my 5-year residency, I regularly worked in the psych emergency, which was less crowded than regular ER. I could often get a few hours of sleep in. But in such departments, things are interesting as far as workload. You don't get the next or previous day off, which means that you start your regular shift on Monday morning 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. Start night shift from 4 p.m. Monday till 8 a.m. Tuesday, and then have your regular Tuesday shift from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. If you're on during the weekend, you come in Sunday at 8 a.m. and you're the on MD till Monday 8 a.m. and then enjoy your regular Monday 8-4. Fun times. Sure, the extra money comes in really handy. But I'm not sure it's worth it. The last 6 months I didn't have to do these shifts, and honestly, I don't really miss them. So yeah, they can fun and active and you do a lot interesting things. But there are many ifs to make that a sustainable way of life. Night shifts in general. Lack of sleep in general. I work night shift for half the year, at least an average probably 5 hours of sleep a night. I am in my mid-40s, and if I shave my hair that is starting to turn white you would think I am 30. My wife looks pretty young as well. She does get better sleep, but she stresses over everything all the time. The real trick is to not have kids. Interestingly, I have worked nights in healthcare for 20 years now. I do not appear aged from it at all. No wrinkles, smooth skin, never had a dark circle under my eyes except once right after a surgery I had. I honestly attest this to not having kids and drinking tea. Just look at Sir Patrick Stewart, and maybe some great genetics. Edit. I also have ADHD, which might account for my ease of working nights, since our brain often neglects to let us know it's night and time to sleep. Same. I'm 45. Been doing shift work since 19. I'm told I look mid-30s max. I also have ADHD, which is an interesting point to consider. Fucking cancer. Have watched my brother-in-law age 30 years in a month. I have been a witness to this many times. 30 years in a month is an accurate measurement. But the last 20 years happens in like 3 days if it's towards the end. My aunt was 40 and sitting next to my 97-year-old great-grandmother, you could easily tell which one was gonna live to be 100. I'm so sorry. Troubleshooting printer problems. I swear these devilish machines only exist to trigger me to smithereens. A couple years ago I decided to officially give up on having a personal printer and only use the one at the library, because when it f's up, it's someone else's problem. I still have my old printer and I've considered dropping it off my roof for fun. I had the opportunity to throw one out of a 3rd-story window. The absolute joy I felt watching that $1 machine soar through the air and smash to smithereens was the best kind of natural high. It's been 15 years and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Darn, it feels good to be a gangster. And alcohol. 20 out of 20 of the people that live in the house next door would agree. I see young people get sucked in. They come around all nice and young. Then after a while their car is gone, but they're still there. Within a year not only do they age, but their body composition, gait, and posture are all well aged. I'd imagine living next door to house doesn't do much for restricting aging. We had 3 parents and adult son, alcoholics next door for a year, and that was a nightmare of sleepless nights listening to them screaming at each other and breaking things. I bought my house unknowing what exactly my neighbors were involved with. Luckily, after a year and a half, they're gone. But not before screaming and loud music late at night. Random people coming and banging on their door all throughout the day. Police responding to an overdose. And an armed standoff on Memorial Day of this year. I'm sure I've missed 5 or 6 other things. If nothing else, I got my fill of it. They've been gone for a few weeks and it's been so much more peaceful in the neighborhood and in my mind. I don't have to worry about being safe in my own yard. Hair loss. Not me personally, but I used to work with a guy who I swore was like 35. And he was 19. Poor kid. When I have an interview, I let my baldness show a little bit. I look older, and I'm taken more seriously by recruiters that way. I have the same strategy but with glasses. People assume you're smarter if you're wearing glasses. Little do they know. I just did this yesterday but with baldness and glasses lol. Before I started hair treatment I looked like I was in 30s. I was 22. Now people say I look 22 and am 24. I also started moisturizing my skin and applying SPF. Does 22 look that different from 24?